Hey folks, this is Brian, and you're listening to the Mission Sicily podcast. Welcome back around again, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on this Mission Sicily podcast. We have completed Q1, the first quarter of 2025, and wow, it has flown. Time has flown. And if you are feeling the same, hopefully you have the sense of having accomplished something good in the world, that you're doing something positive. You're leaving a positive impact. I know that we are here. Just came to mind as I was opening here, how terrible would it be for time to be moving so fast and we're just spinning wheels or getting nothing done. So yeah, that's a pause and reflect, Selah moment here as we open up. Didn't expect that, but there it is. Anyway, hope you're doing well wherever you are, and that you have the same sense of joy, excitement, anticipation for the rest of the year. But as we pause here to look back at Q1, I wanted to share with you the exciting things that God has done here in, our mission field, our campo di lavoro. Just if you're joining us for the first time, let me pause here to say a little bit about who we are, what we do, and hopefully that helps tie in, with what you're about to hear. So we exist as a mission to make disciples, plant churches, and build bridges here in Sicily, where I am. I'm located on the easternmost part of the island, near the big city of Catania, the second largest on the island. And we have a network now all over Italy. When I say all over, I mean from north to south. We're about 6 to 8 people, depending on how you slice that pie. And we're working together really for these same values, principally for discepolato, making disciples. Planting churches is something very particular to a few of us, and building bridges a little bit more even acute or streamlined or specific. And so we're excited, though. We love the DNA of this group that we are part of. It's called the Grande Mandato, the Great Commission, with our friend in the north, Stefano Longo, that has been on this podcast before, and a couple of others smattered in different places, north, south, east, and west over Italy. And so we're excited about that. But what are we doing? We're striving to enlist, train, and deploy the next generation of disciple makers, church planters, and bridge builders. We want to see a multiplication movement emerge among young leaders that's fueled by a passion for Jesus and a heart for their homeland. And we place a very heavy value on indigenous, facilitative, biblically based, Jesus-modeled methodology. And so all of that to say, that's who we are, what we do, just a little bit to give you a clue as to where we're going now as we talk through the mission here and what we've seen over the last couple of months. These are our guiding principles. This is our core values. It's what directs this mission, and this is why we're here. So thank you for being here, and let's jump into it. The first thing I want to say as we get started is about church planting in general. A year or two ago, I had the privilege of joining a group of missionaries in a conference in Turkey, and we took a tour of the 7 churches that are mentioned in the book of Revelation, chapters 2 and 3. So modern-day Turkey, Asia Minor, as we're referring to it in the past, And these churches are, you've heard of them, you know them, you've probably studied them: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And as we looked at these churches that have fame, and you mention their names, everybody knows who they are. Maybe you don't know precisely where they were, but you know that John was exiled to the island of Patmos, right off of the coast, and he's looking towards the coastline, and he's talking to these 7 churches, but I think he's talking to the church, and vicariously through him, through them, to us today. And we looked at these churches, and some of them still have some well-preserved, even tourist attraction level ruins, so that you can go and imagine what was there in that city. Now, obviously, the church itself that maybe John was referring to was probably inside of people's homes, and there was no physical structure in the first couple of centuries, around the time John is writing, and then shortly thereafter, and so that would have come much later, but nothing exists, even of those towns today, except for, and what I mean is of that original city and the original, the buildings that would have been there. Of course, there's Smyrna, which is modern-day Izmir. Of course, Ephesus, which is really an archaeological site near Selçuk, Turkey. So there's some things to kind of point to. Philadelphia has a name, I don't know how to say it, Al-Asir, maybe, something like that. And some ruins of an ancient church exist, but no continuous Christian community there. And so, when we're talking about the people that John was writing to, nothing exists from that period to point to. And in fact, we understand that there were really just 2 faithful witnesses, using the church as a witness, 2 of those churches that were really faithful to Christ. And so, looking at it through the lens of, wow, church planting, all this work, making disciples, planting churches, building bridges, all that work goes in, and what's going to be left in a couple centuries? That's something that goes through my mind, Gino's mind, as we're partnered together down here, other pastors that we're tethered together with. God calls us here for this season. I would love to do something that leaves a lasting impact. I don't mean some memorial or some, fame, etc. No, I mean, but something that leaves an indelible impression that even centuries later, we can see the work of God, and we can see how it multiplied, replicated, all of that. That would be our greatest hope, our greatest dream come true, is that God would allow something like that. But even in the work that was done among these early disciples, people like Timothy and Paul, Apollos, John, others, as we look at the works that they did, and that, within a couple centuries, these churches essentially dried up, and maybe they inseminated other places and grew there. That's how God works, right? The wind blows, and it blows the seeds of the gospel around, and we don't control what happens, but we're responsible to plant, we're responsible to water. God gives the increase. He's responsible for all of that, and we're just happy to be participating in his harvest fields. That said, you would like to know that, if there's some fruit that remains, that's kind of our highest hope, and a part of this calling. And so, talking about, as we did opening up here on this podcast today, that you want to know, time flies. Are you doing some good? Are you doing something that lasts? And these churches came to mind, and that's our hope. Would God give us at least 2 out of 7 church plants that remain faithful to him and continue to be salt and light and an example in the world, and change the culture to be something that resembles the kingdom. And we'll come back around to the kingdom at the end of this podcast because it kind of ties into this topic. It ties into what we're doing, why we're doing it, and it ties into what we're teaching here in the local church, the local assembly. And so I think that would be interesting for some just to hear. We'll kind of pull the curtains back a little bit so you can hear what's happening. And so looking at January, February, and March for this year, looking at Q1. So we started in late December, early January with some conversations with our network. I'd mentioned the Grande Mandato network, talking with Stefano. We've been able to resurrect a kind of a skeleton crew from a previous network that, because of logistics in ministry, because of people being moved around, and because of life happening and different phase and a different season, etc. The network itself was laid down for a time, and we've brought that back around and given it some purpose and a shared DNA that I think is much more cohesive than before. And we're using this network as a way for us down here, way, way down in the south, we're in the extreme south of Italy, to hear from the extreme north, the east and the west and everything in between, to understand what God is doing. What does it look like in your harvest field? What is God calling you to? What's working? What's not working? Why? What can we pray into? What do you need encouragement for? Hey, here's what's what's happening in our context, what it looks like, what we need prayer for, and we are able to really encourage and share. And this is a new thing because, from the beginning, as we came into Italy, we understood from national leaders, this is, leaders that are working on a national level, they're all over, they see what's happening north to south, east and west. We've heard for decades, literally decades here, that we, the evangelical church in Italy, we are few and far divided. There's a lot of isolation that happens. And so a network like this kind of ties into that bridge building that we were talking about, where we're breaking down the barriers and of isolation and creating something that allows us to communicate, to share, to encourage, to sharpen one another. And so really excited about that. There's a lot of lone missionaries in different places that without a network like this, remain soul workers, not understanding how they are perhaps cooperating and participating, or maybe even against the flow of what God is doing on a national level. And that's not to say that, what God calls us to do isn't specific to our context and needs to be contextualized, et cetera, but it's so helpful to understand, wow, this is what God's doing. There's a movement that He is behind, and so that we can better attune ourselves. It's like tuning into a radio station for the first time on a desert island, and you kind of get a sense of the greater world around you, and you go, okay, how do I participate with that? How do I come in line with that? And that's really exciting, especially in a country like this that is historically so isolated and alone. As we moved into February and began planning for the year, we went to Albania, me and Gino, a place that I had been before to participate in a conference there with our mission network. The mission network, by the way, as some of you have already asked me, and I think most of you already know, what was once United World Mission out of Charlotte, North Carolina, is now called Mesa Global. It is the exact same mission agency, just a little bit different branding. There, over the last couple of years, we had the honor, the privilege of incorporating into our mission some other mission agencies that were struggling on their own. And so the Latin American mission and some others were incorporated in, and we needed a name that better signified or referred to who we are and what we do globally. And that, it was time for a little bit of a change. It was time to see that update. And so that's what the name was about, the change was about, and hopefully it didn't cause too much confusion. But part of our agency works in Albania, and some now very good friends are pastoring there. They've been pastoring there really since the wall came down. So we're talking, a long time. And as we were there to talk about certain things that are happening there in their context, we also went there because of some things happening in our context. Let me unpack that. Let me explain. So here in Sicily and in Italy in general, we have a lot of Albanian refugees and immigrants from the last 30 years that because of the wars in the Balkans, they've come over because we're really just separated by a very narrow sea, the Adriatic Sea. So from, up high in Slovenia, coming down Croatia, coming down, all the way down to Greece, you have this land that's facing the whole peninsula of Italy and separated by just that very narrow sea. And Albania is in there with some others that, I won't mention just for time's sake today. But in visiting Albania, we had this in mind, that because we have so many refugees, we have so many immigrants here from the last 3 decades that are integrating, but still struggling with Italian culture and who they are, their past, communism, the dictatorship that was there in Albania. It was a very different kind of communism than the rest of this area of the Eastern Bloc, the eastern side of the European Union now. Very different experience, very different history, tragic dictatorship, a lot of oppression. It resembled much what modern-day Northern Korea looks like. And so you can just imagine what people suffered and went through. And so as soon as the walls came down, a lot of them came here just to escape and get out of that pressure cooker. And as they came in, of course, they found a different language, a different culture, a different everything. And a lot of them are still struggling. That's the bottom line. And so we noticed that here, even in our little town of 28,000, Belpasso, we have a lot of Albanians. And we were struggling as a church to understand their mentality, to understand where they're coming from, how we can reach them, how we can minister to them. I said, let's go back and visit my friend in Albania, because I bet he can give us some insight into what they've been through, where they're coming from, what matters to them, what their values are. How do we reach them? How do we, be hospitable and loving to them in a way, in a language, in a method that they can receive, and that it doesn't feel so strange and foreign to them. And so that was the purpose. It was a great trip. We came back really fueled about our local context here. We had the privilege of preaching there and understanding what they're doing, and that was super helpful. And as we're praying through this, guys, and I've asked for prayer on this before, I want to just pause and make the appeal again for prayer. As we prayed through this and looking into the rest of this year, we're sensing God leading us in this direction to partner with other ministries, with other pastors, with other leaders in other countries that are doing a similar thing as we're doing here. And we're seeing, as Gino has been traveling, he was in Turkey last year and met some emerging pastors there. As we're looking at what's happening in Albania, next month I'll be going back to Estonia, a place that I had previously ministered in for a year and a half. It seems like a lifetime ago. We're talking 15, 16 years ago, something like that. And, going back there, and then Romania and other places on the map are popping up where we have contacts and we have other pastors, leaders that are doing similar things that we're doing here. And for camaraderie, for the sake of a network, for the sense of being on mission together in Europe, we're seeing these bridges start to form, and we're going, okay, God, what are you doing? What are you up to? And we're seeing that it's informing our local context here, and it's so beautiful to see that when it happens, somebody comes out of their own sandbox, their own playground, and they travel, they go abroad, they see what's happening in other parts of Europe that are similar but different, and we come back informed, educated, our eyes opened, our borders and confines and boundaries opened up a little bit, and we have a greater sense of the movement of God. Just to give you another example along the same line, as Gino's been studying and doing some higher education for a master's degree, some theology stuff and leadership stuff, he's been challenged a lot with including and bringing in and being hospitable to and open-hearted to other cultures. And you might be saying, Brian, but the Sicilians, they're they're famous, and it's notable how welcoming, and they always have a sense of open heart and open hearth, and I'd say, that's really true if you're visiting. When you end up moving in next door, the walls go up. This is just typical here, and we've talked about that before. We've had some stories to illustrate that anecdotally, but all that to say, there's, for those that are actually living among us, we have Syrians here, Romanians here, Albanians here, Ukrainian, and when they move in and they're living next door to you, there's this tendency to go, okay, you're now here, you're settled, I don't need to be hospitable anymore. The walls go up and people feel isolated. And so we're noticing that in our DNA as a church, because that's part of the culture here, and we're going, okay, God, how do we address this? How do we get this out? And we're seeing that part of that process is just opening our eyes. We're opening our eyes, and we're looking up from the place where we are to see where God is calling us to. And so with this travel that we've been doing, God has been doing a work in us, and at the same time, hopefully encouraging the people that we have been going to, and having this camaraderie and bridge building and all of that. It's really, really exciting. And so thank God for the work that He's doing in us so that He can do a greater work through us. And then in March, we finally initiated a collaboration with a group that's been down in Catania, ministering primarily to refugees and immigrants, really for the last 8 years, I'd say. And as we've talked and worked with them, we've kept pressing on how can we collaborate? Where do the pieces of our cloth, the DNA, where does it mix and merge and one segue into another where we can find that overlap to be a bridge that we can both walk on and collaborate on. And so one of the things that has been prevalent for them and that they've been doing a really good job at is street evangelism. And we're talking, just about walking the streets, praying, running into people in the cafe or in the park, or just on the street and striking up a conversation and talking about Jesus. Yep, that kind of old school evangelism. But we're of course, understanding the context that we're in, the needs that people have, and how that needs to look and feel for them to be open to receiving. And so we've had some great conversations already just in the last couple of weeks, and a bit of a heartbeat and a rhythm has started to emerge there in Piano Tavola, where historically we have tried to plant before, and this was before COVID, and then of course everything got shut down, and God looks like. It looks like God is getting things moving there again. And so we're collaborating as a church with their group and different mission groups that come through to create that heartbeat and rhythm, eventually to do the same kinds of discovery Bible study, or getting into the scripture together and just asking questions and saying, okay, what does this mean? What does this say about God? What does this say about mankind? What does this say about us personally? What do we need to do with it? And walking through scripture together, much of in the way that we do up here in Bel Paso. And as you know, we've got different groups going on that, and I think I've mentioned this before, they're studying Scripture. Some of them have been in the church 20, 30 years. We have a 60-year history here, but they've been in the church since they were young, and they're saying, we've never studied Scripture like this before. They're coming to the class with pages and pages of notes that we're not forcing them to do. We've placed no expectations on that other than to prepare and to be part of the conversation. It's not something that we sit down and teach them. We as a group are studying Scripture together and discovering what God has to say about who He is and who Jesus is. And we're following in the footsteps of Jesus and following in the footsteps of Paul on his missionary journeys. And we're learning so much together. That's what's happening here in our context. That's what's happening through Gino and I and our collaboration. And I'm excited to say also that because of some generous funding from a foundation in the United States identifying Gino as a candidate for some benevolence, they are going to be underwriting his next season of higher education. We're so excited about that. Gino and I will both be pursuing a degree that's kind of like, if you're familiar with seminary and how all the degrees work and everything, an MDiv. And that is, but ours would be kind of a junior model, or without the extra language components, so without Greek and Hebrew, but doing the basic leadership modules, the theology modules, and really with an emphasis on practice, putting into practice in our local context what we're learning. So we're really excited about that and can't wait to start. So grateful for our friends in the States who have been generous to Gino. For those that have been participating with Mission Sicily and donating in, I want to say a heartfelt thank you. We are still lacking about 30% of our funding to be completely financially viable, financially sustainable here in Sicily. Some of that was due to life circumstances and then COVID and all of that. We have not come back to the States yet in the last 3 years to do proper fundraising that's slated for 2026. Gino, I really feel strongly I need to bring Gino back with me and put him in front of some churches, some pastors, some leaders, and let him speak to the context here, what we're seeing, what we need, and how their support, your support, is being beneficial, would be beneficial to us and to the church and the emerging leaders that we're forming over here and the churches that are being planted, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that is being arranged, but because of some back issues, the health of his father that's now in his 80s, a lot of, you got to wait for the right timing and season of things, and I don't want to just force something to happen that's not ready to happen. But we're feeling that need to come back. So a couple of things in here to pray about. First of all, giving thanks for quarter one, so the first 3 months of this year, for the explosion of study and interest that we're seeing both in our local context and in some of the neighboring towns like Piano Tavola. Thanks for the education that God is allowing Gino and now even myself to go through as we're going through some things together in the next few months. We're so grateful for God allowing that to happen and how He's working in our personal lives. So grateful. Would you pray for what the next quarter, the next 3 months needs to look like with regards to the education and the seminary that we'll be doing online? Would you pray for the next 3 months as we're talking about what the next quarter needs to look like for mission and planting and disciple making in these other towns, even about relocating? We've been talking about it for years, and now my wife Rosie, we're looking at the north of Italy as a place that we could go and plant ourselves, be sent out from the church here, plant ourselves there to do the same kind of thing that we did down here in Sicily, but to do that in the north, continuing to be connected to the local church down here. We're looking for a strategic place where maybe there's a direct flight that takes an hour, hour and a half max, and we could be in town cheaply, economically, spend a weekend, spend a week, whatever that would look like, and then to go back home and continue the work there, hopefully with a young pastor like what we found here in Gino over 10 years ago now. Even younger, a 20-something couple that's fresh in the ministry that we can come alongside as mentors and partners and help them do what God's calling them to do. That's kind of what we're seeing in this season that God is preparing us for with this education, is how can we be of even greater impact and value to the younger generation that we're called alongside to help serve and lift them up, so that, we never had that. I was talking to Gino about this the other day. We never had a baton passed to us. We never had mentors or people who really discipled us, led us, and that were able to encourage us as we got our hands dirty in the ministry, doing the work. We were on our own, and we don't want that for the next generation. We want to help them accomplish even more, do greater things than we have been able to do by the grace of God. And so cooperating together in that and allowing the grace of God to flow in and through us as a group, that's what we're so excited to see happening. And so would you pray for that? Would you pray for this network of Grande Mandato? And I just want to end here and talk a little bit about what we're teaching on the kingdom mission of God. But before I do, I'm so grateful for your prayers. We need funding. As I said, we're 30% down in what we need right now to be financially sustainable. Would you pray about donating on a monthly basis or a special gift? That would be so helpful to us in this season. But even more so, the prayer. Even more valuable would be your prayers. If you can do both, great. But if you can only do one, would you pray? Would you pray for these things? Give thanks together with us for the good things that God is doing, and pray that the Lord of the harvest would continue to send new workers, new laborers into these harvest fields, and to continue to send us. As we're talking about these new ventures and what God's doing, that He would send us. We're here for this purpose. We're ready to go. We are waiting for that open door, the green light. We're waiting for light on the path. We're waiting for a strong word, a clear call, all of that. And so thank you for partnering together with us in prayer for this next season of ministry Q2. That said, I want to wrap up with just a couple of thoughts here. I grew up in the church. My folks were pastors, and they pioneered two different churches in two different states in the southern U.S. And I remember Gosh, I remember there being a call to mission, but I also did not have a good understanding of what mission really was. And I remember missionaries coming through the church, and they were a little strange, and corny jokes and and all of that, talking about where they were, and I would think, oh well, that's super interesting. Now let me get back to my life. Oh, good for you. God called you there. I hope he never calls me. Let's get back to, my junior high school experience, whatever. And I remember going into the military and seeing the world as they promised that I would, and God opening my eyes. And that ties into a little bit what we were saying about the beginning. If you're in a isolated place, you stay within your four walls, you're in your trench, and you don't get out of that rut, it's hard to see what God might be calling you to, or he might be saying to you, because you just got this routine down. So, and it's hard to break out of. And God broke me out of that, put a hook in my heart for coming here to Sicily 30 years ago. So this was, this was early 90s, first Gulf War, and the first President Bush, all of that. But something that has been emerging recently here is the kingdom mission of God, and how what we're doing here and what the local church in America, where I'm from, we're on the same mission. We're doing the same kingdom business, or at least we should be, right? That's the idea. But there's this more cohesive picture that's emerging now for us in the work that God's doing presently here, and that's the kingdom mission of God from Genesis in the garden to Revelation in the New Jerusalem. In one way or another, we're all involved in the sending process of God's kingdom mission. The God's kingdom has a mission, and we're all called and empowered to be ambassadors. We know that. We're called to co-labor with Christ in his harvest fields. We're all called to be salt and light, testimonial givers about the King, about Jesus and his kingdom that's come. It's already and not yet, as we know. And I don't mean that all of us are necessarily, quote unquote, missionaries going to the uttermost parts of creation. However, we're all participating in that process. And you could say that, one might be called to go, and that's Matthew 28's command, to the other side of the planet. Another, might be called to go to their neighbor across the street, or their neighborhood barista. Some send others to faraway places, and others actually go there. We're talking Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. That's Acts 1. And the cost is different. Of course, you might buy someone a cup of coffee to have a chat where you live. And to do that here, the cost of a cup of coffee or whatever, is different. And it might be the cost of a cup of coffee a day. You could send someone to the other parts of the earth. And so going carries other costs, let's say it like that, beyond just the financial. You give up your house and home, your family, your friends, your familiar surroundings, culture, language, et cetera, to adopt something foreign, unfamiliar, and difficult. It's a sacrifice, both for the sender back home, wherever home is, and the goer, wherever they go. In order to make all that happen, there are sacrifices that have to be made. But working in unison, the mission of the kingdom moves forward. And in the kingdom, we're all contributing our time, goods, services, through prayer, encouragement, acts of generosity, support, physical labor, et cetera, et cetera. The kingdom thrives in this way, and each individual part has an individual function. Each part is important and interdependent on other parts, and there's harmony in the body when all contribute, right? There's no cancer. There's nothing just taking and not giving, but there's a contribution and a sharing that's happening. And, this is all very clear and familiar territory to many of us. But I want to, I'll put a pin in it here, and we'll pick this up again the next time, because I want to share what I personally struggled with for years about missions. And, I grew up in the church. My parents were pastors. They went to Bible school 2 different times, and I was there as a kid along with them, sleeping underneath the seats as the preacher went on and on for hours. I grew up in that, and I've always admired missionaries, but thought they were kind of quirky and shocked by their unfamiliar contexts, and it didn't really pull my heartstrings until probably listening to the music of Keith Green. And this is where I'll put a little pin here, and we'll pick up on this the next time. But it was the late 70s, early 80s when that music got my attention, and really I started to hear in the vibration of the music and the lyrics the heartbeat of God's heart for his people, when Keith would sing, "How can they live without Jesus?" and something began to stir in me, but I didn't know theologically where that fit into the Bible story, because I just couldn't see the kingdom mission of God. And so we'll put a pin there. I'll come back around to it. But I'm excited to share a little bit about my story and where that's coming from. And hopefully you get something out of that too. But you see why we're here, why we're doing what we feel God has called us to do. So thank you for your prayers, your support, your encouragement, your love, your kind words. Please send any thoughts or comments or questions. You can just hit us at missionsicily@gmail.com. Hit us on the website. Take a look at what we're doing on YouTube, through Instagram or the Facebook page. We have a newsletter. All of that is available, missionsicily.com. And God bless you. We will talk to you again very soon.